Should see the indicator show up. And welcome everybody to another 12 o'clock show with Mayor Joe. Joining us today, thankfully, State Senator Jay Hottinger, who's in between debates and good conversations at the House there. So I appreciate you coming in today and having us taking some time and talking to us. Do we have pictures up there? Okay, just making sure to discuss some technical things. Again, thank you for coming in today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Mayor. Happy to join you.
First question I kind of talk to everybody about is obviously it's been an interesting year with COVID. A lot of people kind of focus on the negative side of things, but what have you kind of done to kind of get yourself through this COVID time period? What have you kind of found like to enjoy the day, enjoy your time with family, things like that?
Well, I will tell you, I've gotten in a lot more steps, a lot more walking. We are doing this via Zoom right now, and I've done a gazillion Zoom meetings. Did more Zoom meetings in the last year by a factor of 100 than I had previous. And so one of the things that I started doing, Mayor, is that because I was doing so much of my work from phone, people were stopped doing in-person visits. So I was doing a lot of work by my cell phone. So I decided that, instead of just, sitting, at a desk, I would, walk and talk at the same time. So I remember, I've been on for over a year now on both under the Trump administration, now under the Biden administration, weekly updates, largely addressing, what's going on with COVID, and walking and the President of the United States on the call talking while I'm walking my dog, and so that was a first for me. So trying to get in. My goal is 20,000 steps every day. It's going to be hard to do that here the next few weeks with the state budget, but when I can, I try to walk, and COVID and the virtual meetings and phone calls allowed me to do that.
Okay, well, I'm right there with you. Usually when I would get home from whatever I was doing, because I would come into the office as much as I could, even without a lot of people here. My wife and I would take a nice long walk around, and we'd update each other about our days and things. So I'm right there with you on the step. Now, you mentioned something already, so it kind of takes my next question. I'm working on the budget right now. Do you want to tell everybody how fun and enjoyable that is for you?
So the budget process, it really is all time consuming. So the governor introduces the budget bill in odd years in February, and it has to be done by June 30th to take effect on July 1st. And so the House just yesterday, they just introduced a sub bill to the budget and Finance Committee just yesterday. So we have a long ways even to absorb to see some of the changes that they've done. But Mayor, I would say that since probably February, 80% of my meetings consist of the budget, even though we don't get it here in the Senate for another week and a half. And so you think about that, most of my meetings, 80% of my day or my meetings are constructed around something that doesn't even arrive in my chamber, at that point in time back in February for months. And so, the budget bill, all funds, federal funds and state funds over the biennium is about $165 billion. So a lot of zeros, a lot of money, but there's also a lot of policy decisions that are made inside the parameters of a budget bill as well. And so we just started informal testimony today in Senate Finance, which I'm a member. We just started informal hearings today, pending getting the bill in about another week and a half. And so that's what I'll be doing all the rest of the morning and afternoon and early evening is budget testimony from various state directors.
It can be interesting. We have a little bit different a process here in the city where council eventually gets it and they go through it, but for the most part, a lot of it is kind of like what you said, the governor presents it and then that's it. So good luck. Make sure you have plenty of coffee if you're a coffee drinker. I know that there's some long days and nights ahead of you on that one.
There is.
One big topic that always comes up, and you and I have talked about this at length before when I was on the school board in Reynoldsburg, is about school funding. I know I saw the House introduce something yesterday that is, I can't remember the specifics, around 100 and some odd, 1 point some odd billion dollars or something along those lines about school funding, very similar to the Cupp-Patterson deal. I know Cupp-Patterson passed in kind of a bipartisan nature in the House side last year towards the end of the year, but it was really, I thought it was probably too late to see any movement on the Senate side, just given the fact of the time period. Do you have any updates on either that bill or something similar to it, or what your general impressions are of school funding bills that you're seeing right now?
Sure. So you're right. So Cupp-Patterson, Cupp coming named after, so it's a Cupp a Republican, Patterson a Democrat. Representative Patterson's no longer now in the legislature, been term limited out, but Cupp is interesting because he's the Speaker of the House. So he has a little bit maybe larger voice than just say the average legislator. And so they did pass the bill sometime, I'm guessing, and I think it was early December last year. And I think the legislature convened sine die, that's the Latin, which means basically done for the year. That was like the second week of December. And so they had the bill for, would have been 23 months. And then they sent it to us with a week to go. And anything of that size and magnitude, Mayor, you just, because we have a bicameral legislature, like 48 of the other 49 states, you really, by sending it to us, having them kept it for 23 months and giving us, a week and a half to work on it, really was not something that made it conducive to be able to get it done last GA. But the thing that I take comfort from the fact is that it, as you indicated, it passed with a large majority in a bipartisan fashion. I was a joint sponsor last GA of a Cupp-Patterson companion bill here in the Senate. That was sponsored by Senator Lehner. She was the chairman of the Education Committee. She's now no longer with us either. She's been term limited out and running for mayor of Kettering. But what the House did just yesterday was, so the governor, when he introduced his budget bill, he did not include a new formula. He did not include a Cupp-Patterson-like formula in his introduced version. Really was just kind of an extension of what he did in the last budget of the wellness dollars and the wraparound dollars and the wraparound services for schools. And so the governor, when he introduced his bill, kind of was an expansion or a continuation of that. And the House did yesterday what I thought they would do, and they'd entered into the bill a Cupp-Patterson-like sort of formula. And so I have not had a chance yet to see all the details, but my understanding of it is that the goal is to phase in the funding over 6 years. And during that 6-year period, every school district would be held harmless. So no school district would see any loss of funding during that time period. And so I suspect that will stay in the final version that the House sends over to the Senate. The Senate will do our work on the budget, and then sometime in May, it'll go May or early June, go into conference committee. At that point in time, the governor's office, the House and the Senate will work out differences. But the good news is that for the first time, every budget year, we're always talking about, school funding. I just took a picture of this, took a screenshot of this morning when the director was testifying. I think it's 34% of the state's GRF. Over a third of the state's GRF is earmarked for K through 12 education. So it's clearly our largest portion of the budget. When you include the federal funds, Medicaid becomes a larger portion, but of state funds, K through 12 is the largest thing that we fund. So every 2 years, we're always addressing and looking at school funding, trying to find ways to do more. But I think late last GA and now this GA is the first time that I would say in a while that there's been significant or more monumental change in the funding formula. So I'm cautiously optimistic. Look, I don't know where we're going to land on June 30th. I don't think anybody does. But I think the good news is that we're all trying to find extra resources that we can put into K through 12 funding. And also the goal of many people is to try to find a formula that really can be, that's rational and that can be justified.
Well, just thinking kind of like taking all of that out of the way, I mean, politicians enjoy getting reelected, and members of the House and the Senate will eventually one day be up. I can imagine how much it would be interesting for people to sit there and say that we solved a problem that has been going on since the late 1990s and finally came about with what a hopeful fair funding plan for schools that is beneficial and doesn't harm schools that have unintended or unexpected growth, but at the same time respects some of the smaller communities that have differences. I know in Licking County, you're looking at farm fields and property taxes, and sometimes it pits farmers versus families over when it comes to school funding. So I'm hopeful that when the time comes in June that it's there, that some good progress has been made and we can kind of get to it. I know in Reynoldsburg, we're looking at roughly about a $5.5 million loss, in terms of the funding from the state. At the same time, other districts have more, some districts have less. But at the same time, you look at those schools out in the rural areas that don't have the same property tax values and property values to fund their schools. So I know it's a little bit of everything. So it's not just one piece. It's not just easy enough to say, well, let's give these schools this much money. But at the same time, you have to worry about those other schools that just don't have that kind of opportunity to generate the revenue.
And Mayor, I'm like you, I'm hopeful and I'm cautiously optimistic, but you may have heard me say this before in years past. I don't think we ever arrive and say, we're done, we're finished. I don't think we can ever say, okay, look, we fixed it, because it's always evolving, it's always changing. So we can improve and make improvements upon, but I don't know if I can ever say, or anybody will ever say, we're done, we're finished. I'm a student of history and I love to look back at the history of the General Assembly. And you can go back at any point in time of what the General Assembly was debating, whether it was 200 years ago, 150 years ago, 100 years ago, 50 years ago, 25 years ago. And the number one thing every legislature was talking about, no matter what year you pick, was school funding. How do we provide more money for schools? How do we provide a fair system for our schools? And so I don't want to be so arrogant to think that we're going to be able to arrive at a fix and say, now we're done. But I think the hopeful thing is that we can make significant improvements and something, again, that I said, as I indicated, that is more fair and something that is more justifiable.
Well, it was interesting because that kind of leads into my next question. I had the opportunity to have former Speaker of the House, Joanne Davidson from Reynoldsburg, on the show just a few weeks ago. And like you and I had a moment to talk before the show started, she and I were talking, and she was actually in a meeting. She chairs one of the casino commissions. And she and I were talking about that. And she was giving me, from her perspective, and her time on the issues of school funding. And it was just as big of a topic then as it is today. But it was interesting how it kind of comes in. And I know you and I talked about this. Actually, I think the last time that we sat face to face was not long after the Supreme Court ruled about sports betting. So I know that there's a couple of topics of conversation that have come out, in the House and in the Senate about what to do with legalized sports betting in Ohio. Talk seemed us around the responsibility of who's going to actually administer this. Is it going to be localized to the casinos, and is it going to be localized into the lottery system? And I know that there's pros and cons to either side. What are your thoughts on that? I know originally when you and I talked, we had a pretty good conversation about it. But if it does something that comes before the Senate and the House, where do you see things lining up? What are the pros and cons of each?
Sure. So, look, from a historical perspective, Mayor, I've never been a big fan of gaming and expanding gaming. I have reasons and rationales behind that. I think, for example, the lottery really is just a distribution of wealth from poorer individuals, to others. So I often say that, the lottery is a tax on people with poor math skills. And so gaming, I've never been a huge fan of expanding gaming. However, that being said, the reality of it is, because of the world that we live in with the internet and people being able to, use their smartphones to be able to place bets, that it is time for Ohio, if gaming is here, through virtual formats, then it certainly should be regulated to make certain that those people who are participating, are protected, that there are safeguards in place, and then also that, that the revenue is being collected from that. And so gone are the days of saying, hey, let's not expand gaming because it's already here via the internet. And so that being the case, I support measures that, again, would put in those safeguards. Where I fall on this is, and so look, I was very critical of the constitutional amendment that legalized gaming in the state of Ohio, and largely because it was written by the gaming industry and they gave themselves a monopoly or an oligopoly, if you prefer. So, Mayor, you and I can't go out there and start a casino or get a group of investors and start a casino, because the way the Constitution is written, because it was written by the casinos and they presented it to the voters, they really have a monopoly. And so my preference clearly is to run this through the Ohio Lottery as opposed to running it through the casinos. And the Senate, this General Assembly, just in January, early February, created a new committee, and it's a special committee just dealing with gaming issues. And so that's the first time in the history of the Ohio General Assembly that you have a committee that's just dealing specifically with gaming issues. But it's big, it's a large amount of money. There's a lot of interest in it, from obviously the casinos, from the professional sports venues, from your online platforms as well. But we want to make certain that we get it right. And so I think that the fact that we now have a standalone committee chaired by Senator Schuring, who's another longtime veteran, hopefully we can get it right.
Well, I'm hoping so. I know that when we had talked, one of the concerns, especially if it does go to the lottery, which that's actually my favorite position as well, because I think it's a little bit more equal distribution throughout the state as opposed to just the localized areas. The concern about how it would be received on the funding side of things. There's a lot of talk in the educational community that when the lottery was promised money to go to the schools, which it was, but it was offset by other reductions from the state. I know that's something that's been talked about before. So I'm hoping that whenever legislation comes forth, if it does go towards the lottery, that there'll be provisions in there, that it will be funding that will be in addition to, not in replacement of already established funds, which I think could be a benefit to the school funding plan overall. So I look forward to it. If you ever have any needs for testimony on that particular thing, please feel free to reach out. I'd love to come on down to the State House and have some words.
Sounds great. We would always welcome you, Mayor.
I appreciate that. Last question kind of came up. I know that one of the big hot topics that, especially with the census and some of the data that's coming out, is about how redistricting is going to work and everything. Do you have any updates on that, or your thoughts on, I hate using the word gerrymandering, but the idea of how some of the districts are drawn? Reynoldsburg is a very unique city because we actually have 3 different counties, and we have 3 different political landscapes within those counties and things like that. I was just curious to see what your thoughts were on that.
Yeah, so as you know, there had been multiple attempts to try to reform redistricting and reapportionment and the drawing of lines. And I was supportive of the measure, actually voted to place it on the ballot. The voters approved it just a few years ago, fairly overwhelmingly. So this is going to be the first redistricting process that is now using that new process. There's additional members, there's additional number of minority, when I say minority party votes to sign off on something before it goes into effect. And so all of those, I think, are good, positive things to make the lines less gerrymandered, more fair districts, more fair lines. The problem that, and you alluded to this, one of the problems that we are having right now, largely because of COVID, is that the data that is coming in is delayed. And so the language that is in our Constitution, and so, you know this, Mayor, but maybe all your listeners don't, the legislature can't change the Constitution. Okay, so all we can do is pass bills, but bills don't change the Constitution. The Constitution requires a vote of the general population. And so part of the redistricting, reapportionment reform measures that were passed and put into the Constitution have some dates on there that are dates that have to be hit in terms of when the lines are made, the maps are made viewable. And the problem is that because the federal census data is behind schedule, we are not going to be able to start drawing maps. The map drawers are not going to be able, when I say we, it's not me. The state of Ohio and all states aren't going to be able to start drawing those maps until after Labor Day. Well, that's already after a hard date that we have to make things available. So those are going to be things that are going to be worked on by legal counsel and by attorneys. There may be something that we have to try to address legislatively, but because of the delay in getting that census data, that information, that track information that you need isn't going to be available till after Labor Day, which means we've already missed part of our date that's set into the Constitution. And so that's yet to be determined exactly how that's going to work. But sometime around Labor Day, we're expected to get that census track data so that lines can start being drawn. But somehow, some way, and again, that's going to be for the attorneys to try to figure out how do we, bypass the hard deadline that's set into the Constitution, which we can't meet because we don't have the census data.
Just another thing to blame on COVID, that darn COVID.
It is on COVID, no doubt about it.
Well, I know that, in my experience, and, you've been in public life for a long time. In my experience, I feel that most people are a lot closer together on a lot of things than what sometimes it may be perceived about in the media. And I think sometimes gerrymandering has been used to accelerate or accentuate some of those differences as opposed to the ideas of the unity that's out there. So I appreciate your work in that. I know that you are very limited on time because you've got to go back out and work on that budget, but I do appreciate you coming in and having some chances to speak with me today. If there's anything else that's going on or any other topics you want to discuss before we wrap up, feel free and share.
Well, there's a lot, Mayor. I mean, we hit on the big ones with the budget and school funding. I would just say probably the last other really big issue is dealing with broadband expansion. It's not just a rural issue. It is, I represent, 5 counties, and some of those are rural counties. And so we have rural access issues, but broadband accessibility is also an issue in our urban settings as well. I'm told that as many as 40% of the population of Cleveland can't afford internet broadband because of affordability issues. And so COVID, this is another issue that really COVID has put a spotlight on and kind of accelerated. And so both, whether it's rural areas or urban or suburban areas, we have to do more for the affordability and accessibility so that everybody has, broadband capabilities. And so the governor, the General Assembly, all of us are put that as a top priority. The governor's got, I think, another $250 million in some of the one-time fund dollars from the COVID relief stuff to help with the infrastructure. And so across the state of Ohio, it's probably a couple $2 billion problem. There's a reason why it's harder to get internet access to a rural township than it is in downtown Reynoldsburg. And so those infrastructure needs are significant, and it's going to take a couple $2 billion, but we're whittling away at it. And I think we're making some great headway.
Well, I appreciate it. And again, thank you for sharing some time. Love to have you back on the show in some time. And hopefully, like I said, maybe I'll see you down at the State House in the not too distant future.
Sounds great, Mayor. Have a good one. Thanks for having me.
Bye now.
Take care.
All right, for everybody else still watching, I appreciate it. I know that questions were a little bit limited because I wanted to be respectful of the senator's time. So we'll kind of go ahead and move forward on talking about some really big topics. Rumpke and our trash delays the last couple of weeks. For those of you that have watched the last 3 weeks, Rumpke has been delayed in certain parts of the area. Last week was probably the worst, where it wasn't just 1 or 2 small houses or 3 houses. It was actually large stretches all the way across. So we reached out to Rumpke and had some conversations. Their explanations for why that there's been delays the last few weeks include a couple of things, including staffing. Apparently, it's very difficult to get people staffed consistently. So by the time that Thursday rolls around, some people are maybe not feeling well, issues with COVID, maybe they're getting the vaccine and they're having some side effects, things like that. So there's been a limited number of employees. They've also had a number of equipment failures. Believe it or not, some of the repair pieces that will come in for some of these bigger vehicles have had some issues getting in. If you remember, the Suez Canal was recently blocked, and some other delays in shipping from different parts of the world for some of the parts in there are another example. Now, the reality is, how do we solve some of these things? Reynoldsburg belongs to a consortium. We have a number of other local communities that negotiate the deal with Rumpke to make sure that we have the best pricing and the best options and things like that. Unfortunately, we are not the only community that has kind of felt the issues that's out there. It's not just us. There are a number of other communities that have seen the same types of shortages. And the contract with Rumpke is actually up at the end of this year. So the consortium is working on addressing some of those issues long term. There are limited choices because there aren't a lot of people out there that for vendors that actually provide trash removal and recycling and then yard waste and things of that nature. But we are working on trying to find some different methods and opportunities to improve service with Rumpke or potentially someone else if the opportunity comes up. In the meantime, what I do suggest is if you do have missing, say if they miss your house, usually again, Wednesday starting at 12 o'clock, you can put your things out and you're supposed to take them back in by basically Friday at 12 o'clock. If they haven't picked your materials up by, sometime early morning on Friday, 9, 10 o'clock, you need to give Rumpke a call. That's going to be your quickest version to get help. You need to let them know that they've missed your area. You need to let them know what specifically, was it their trash? Was it the recycling? Was it yard waste? And let them know. You're obviously welcome to call the city. We do keep track of it. It's able for us to actually kind of get an idea of, is it localized to a particular area? Is it a one route? Unfortunately, like I said last week, it was almost entire neighborhoods and streets. I don't believe that, even in my neighborhood, I think the recycling wasn't even picked up as of Monday at one point in time. But at the same time, you can also, when you do call them, you can request a credit for the fees that they charge for that service if they have not been there. So again, those are just a couple of the steps to take a look at. If there are delays expected, please pay attention to the Reynoldsburg webpage. We'll have that on there, social media, obviously. And of course, Reynoldsburg Connects, which is going to give you your most up-to-date information. Right at the moment that we get it, we'll try and get it out to everybody as soon as we're notified of any kind of potential delays all the way throughout. While we're there, let's go ahead and start. Do we have any questions? Even if there were a couple of questions from the senator, we can make sure we can forward to his office and try and get that.
We have two for the senator. We'll make sure that we get forwarded on.
Okay.
It was asking about some of the work that he's completed. So we'll make sure we get that sent on to him.
Any other questions at the time?
Not this time.
All right, so we'll go ahead and talk about a couple of good things. Community cleanup and garage sale time. We are going to have the community garage sales. Again, it's typically that first weekend in June, for that week where you don't have to necessarily get your $1 permit from the city for the garage sales. So those are on. All that we ask is that everybody pays attention to the standards, similar to last year as far as COVID, the social distancing, gloves and things of that nature. So keep that out, but you have that opportunity to do so. We'll get some more information out on our social media and webpage about the official, the date and time frame for everything. We are going to have, we are moving our community cleanup day that would normally be that first Saturday in June, June 6th. And we're actually going to be moving that to October. The biggest reason is one of the biggest draws for that is the shredded truck. We are unable to get a shredded truck in for this month because, again, COVID. So we are going to have them come out here to Reynoldsburg in October, on October 16th. We are also going to have hazardous materials, including some other things. Maybe if you had watched the show last week, I think Director Dorman may have mentioned a number of those different things that you can bring in for hazardous materials. So we'll have that information out as well. But what we are going to try and do is we're going to have a litter contest. One of the things that kind of has been kicked around, you've seen on social media, people going out and packing up the litter. We are going to have a litter contest the week of June 6th through basically June 13th. And what we're going to do is we're going to invite members of our community to pick up litter. And then when they pick up their litter and put it in their trash bags, they can go ahead and take a picture of themselves and submit it to the city. And they'll be entered into a drawing for some sort of a reward, a gift card from local businesses that we hope will donate for this particular thing. This isn't a contest to see who can do the most. So I know there's a couple of groups out there that are going to pile on and get a ton of it done. It's more about making sure that everybody has the opportunity to participate and be recognized for their contributions to help make Reynoldsburg look a little bit nicer. I know we've got some other ones coming in between, and unfortunately, litter doesn't seem to go away even after you picked it up. It's kind of how I feel about dusting. I'll dust, and then 10 minutes later, it doesn't look like I've dusted. It's kind of like litter, unfortunately. So I think hopefully with a little bit more personal responsibility and a little bit more community that's active and able to go out and take care of some of those things, that would be great. If you are interested and would like some supplies, you are more than welcome to reach out to the city. We have trash pickers, we have garbage bags, all sorts of cool things. for her to go ahead and collect, but we try to keep it organized to make sure that we have somebody to pick up the litter at the end of it. So keep an eye out for some of those things. Any questions on that? Nope. All right. I see occasionally some people laughing, so there must be some good commentary on social media. So I'll have to check that out afterwards. We do have a couple of seasonal jobs still available, including some things for maintenance and grounds here at Reynoldsburg for the city. If you are interested in any of those things, feel free and check out our webpage. We have also posted the position, I believe, for our social worker for the police department. So if you know someone who is interested and might meet the qualifications for the social worker, please feel free and direct them to our page so we can get them on. Really excited about the social worker coming into our community to help our police department do the jobs that they need to do. A couple of events coming up. We have the 4th of July, Grand Marshal nominating forms are available. So please go ahead and check those out if there's somebody that you feel that you need to nominate for the Grand Marshal for the Reynoldsburg Parade. It's hosted by the Reynoldsburg Community Association. So thank you to the Community Association for helping organize this. The parade will be on Saturday, July 3rd at 10 a.m. I put in an order for a nice sunny day. I'm not sure if I'll get listened to, but I'm trying. Some other good events that are coming up that I want to kind of mark your radars for. We have our Artist and Makers Market on June 5th from 11 to 6. That's going to be an awesome time. Please come out and support some of the local Artist and Makers Market. It's going to run very similar to a farmer's market. So there'll be a little bit of social distancing and things like that. But there's going to be some great vendors there. And it's going to be at Huber Park, Livingston. It's at Livingston House. So make sure you're there for that. We also have our Music in the Cul-de-sac. I know Parks and Rec posted that just the other day. So Music in the Cul-de-sac is coming out. Those are going to begin on Thursdays in June. So keep an eye. We've got a great variety of lineups out there. So keep an eye out for when those show up. And our concerts on the lawn at the Livingston House will also begin in June. We're still trying to narrow down everybody that we're going to have performing, but we're looking forward to, again, kind of getting out. There's going to look a little different than in the past, but we're going to have these events, and that's going to be the most important thing. Parks and Rec is going crazy. We've got soccer, baseball, softball, all of that stuff's going on. You've got your Pine Quarry walks. Volunteers for Plant Reynoldsburg are going to be welcome here on May 22nd. And then on Earth Day at Pine Quarry on the 24th, you're going to have, and again, I still don't know what they are, but bare root plantings. I assume that their roots are bare and we're going to put them in the ground. Not an expert, but let's hope with that. And then, Arbor Day activities as well here at City Hall on April 29th. The Tomato Festival's meetings are continuing to go on. If you were interested in volunteering, it's the first Tuesday of every month. Eventually, we'd like to hopefully bring them back into City Hall. As with our council meetings, President Jenkins and council will be discussing that at the next meeting to determine whether or not they're going to come back in May. I know that was the original plan. City Hall's all ready for them. We've got our big plastic screens up everywhere and all of that. Just a couple of other details to work out. So we look forward to welcoming council and community members back to City Hall, hopefully as early as May. We do have our blessing boxes, which if you didn't get a chance to watch the marathon session of council on Monday, we did have recognition of our blessing box community here in Reynoldsburg. Locations are listed on Facebook. We have one at City Hall that is relatively well staffed, stocked all the time, non-perishable foods only. So please make sure you do that. While we're here, I'd like to make a big shout out and thank you to the Lions Club, the Reynoldsburg City School District, Reynoldsburg City, RPD, and the Impact Church for coming out this past weekend. The community was amazing and providing a great amount of food supplies for the Helping Hands Food Pantry this past weekend here at City Hall. I'm sure we'll have another one in the not too distant future, but again, thank you to all who participated and for all that took the time out of their day to donate something for those that need a little bit more than the rest of us. Do have some interesting news for development. Again, in the marathon session on Monday night for council, council did approve the opportunity for the city to purchase the 2 pieces of property, the former PNC Bank location and the Happy Dragon. And so you'll be getting updates as we get them, as we kind of move forward with this to get you updated on what potentially may be going in there. I do know that we got a number of phone calls yesterday, people already interested in moving particular businesses into those spaces. So I'm really looking forward to making those things announced. Once everything, the ink is dried and we know exactly what's going to go in there. Next week, we have a very special guest. We're going to have Truro Township Community Paramedic Sarah Knapp come out and join us next week. She'll either be on Zoom or she might actually make it here. And she's going to tell us a little bit about, well, what does a community medic mean? What does that do? Probably also talk a little bit about how we hope to have our community medic partner with our social worker that we're bringing in here to RPD. So I'm really looking forward to that. Truro Township does a great job. Unfortunately, I saw them out in action just a few weeks ago when there was a fire in the neighborhood in which I live in. Truro Township was there, and I live on the eastern side off Kingsley. But really, before I even got to the house, when I saw the smoke, Truro and West Licking were already there, so they were on top of everything as always, making sure that people's lives were safe and try and save as much property as they can. So, looking forward to that. Do we have any questions coming up? Anything? Nothing at all. All right. Well, as always, you know that if you have any questions, you're more than welcome to ask them. And I'm here to answer them every single Wednesday from 12 to whenever. Eventually, I will take a day off on one of these shows, but I don't think it'll be till June. So please make sure you're able to join us and ask those questions, or feel free and stop in at City Hall and have a conversation. In the meantime, have a wonderful day. Stay safe, stay respectful out there, and most assuredly, please put away your shopping carts. The weather's nice enough. You don't have to run. You don't have to leave it there. It's not cold anymore. Make sure you put the shopping carts away. Have a great day, everybody, and we'll see you next week.